Hi guys, it's Precious. After the class on Tuesday on standard costing, I realized that some students were not really certain of the differences between a price variance and a volume variance. So the aim of this video is to basically just go through that in summary, just to remind you of what we did in class. And I want you to keep in mind our working example, which is on support a baby, because I'll be using for this video the material price variance. So as a start, a price variance would arise from the difference between what you were supposed to spend which is actually your standard, right? And what you actually spent for a unit. If you look on the volume side, I'll use a different color pen. If you look on the volume side, this we are looking at what was used or consumed for a unit versus what was supposed to be used. So the difference arises from two people. We have on the one side a purchasing manager, so this is when a purchasing manager goes and buys material, for example, at a price that is different from what he was supposed to use as per the standard. So he spends more than what he was supposed to spend. That is the purchasing manager. And on the other hand, we can have a production manager. Now this manager is at the production plant. He is responsible to actually turn the input into the output. Now, what we're looking at when we speak of volume, we're looking at what he used to produce one unit versus what he was supposed to use. And what he was supposed to use is actually the standard. Now, if we can use an example, please. As I said, I'm going to be using the example that we used, which is support a baby, which is what we used in class. The first thing that I want to do is record the information that you were given as it is, and then calculate the variances so you can see the differences. Now, what we were given in the scenario is that our standard price was 80 Rand per kg, excuse my 80, and our actual price was 82 Rand per kilogram. Now when we come to the volume side, we had a standard of 2 kgs per unit. So this means that to make one bathtub for support a baby, we need 2 kgs of material A. However, we actually use 1.95 kgs per unit, right? So look at it this way. Now, if I want to calculate my variance, I will say a price variance, let's take it back a bit. A price variance, like I said there, is the difference between what you were supposed to spend and what you actually spend, and the purchasing manager is responsible for it because he actually went out to go buy the goods. Now, we're saying here on support a baby, the standard price is 80 Rand per kilogram, and the actual price was 82 Rand. Now, the difference between the standard price of 80 and the actual price of 82 Rand is only 2 Rands. Now, this means that the purchasing manager only spent 2 rands more than he was supposed to. If you take this to the finance director, 2 rands is nothing. Remember, the company Support a Baby has, for example, sales of 26 million. So this really is nothing. It has zero impact. However, for us to show the impact of the decision to buy the material at 82 rand instead of 80 rand, we need to multiply it by the units that were actually bought. So we will say 2 multiplied by 115,000. Now this is the total units that we manufactured, if you can remember from our example. We will multiply this by 1.95 kg because this are the kgs we actually used per unit. So the point of this calculation is to just show me how many kgs were bought, because remember, this price that is quoted is at kgs. So it's 80 rand per kg or 82 rand per kg, which is the actual price. Now I want to multiply by 2 rands, that difference, right? And the answer that I will get there is 448,500. You see, now we're talking. Now we've shown the impact of his decision. Now what we're saying is that because he went and bought material at 82 rand instead of 80 rand, he has cost the company 448,500. Okay? So people ask me, or students ask, why here do we use actual and not standard? And my answer for that is actually, what did he buy? He bought the actual, not the standard. So the impact of his decision is that he actually went out and bought material to make 115,000 units at 1.95 units used per unit. So that's what he actually went out to buy. That is the cost of his decision. However, if you look at the volume side, this is how we do it. We would say, like we did here, what was the impact of using 1.95 kgs instead of the 2 kgs? And that would be shown by this calculation. We would say, okay, you went and used, I started with the standard. So you went and used 1.95 kgs instead of 2 kgs, right? And the answer there is 0.05 kgs. So you spent 0.05 kgs less on 1 unit. So instead of taking only 2 kgs of material A to make 1 unit, you only took 1.95 kgs for 1 unit. Okay, now that is all good. However, how many kgs did we actually use? We need to multiply by the number of units, 115,000, to see how many units we actually used. So in total, the amount of kilograms will be from the 0.05 multiplied by the 115,000. Now we still have to multiply by 80 rands, which is the standard price. And the answer for this will give you 460,000. Students struggle with the 80. The questions I get are around, why do you not use the actual price of 82 rand but only use 80 rands? My question to you is, if I use 82 rand and not the 80 rands, what am I saying? Am I saying that we are going to blame the production manager for the 2 rand difference? Because if I use 82 rand there instead of 80, I'm showing impact of the 2 rand. And we're also going to blame him for using 1.95 kgs instead of 2 kgs. And that is actually quite unfair. So we cannot have more than one variance in a variance calculation, which is why I use the standard price, because I'm saying, well, the only thing that he is responsible for, the only thing that the production manager is in control of is this, the units that are used to produce, because that is his job. He's a production manager. He works in the manufacturing plant. So he has to make sure that we use the standard that we're supposed to use for our production. However, he doesn't go out to buy the material, so he cannot take the blame for the 2 rand difference. The purchasing manager needs to take a blame for that. And the purchasing manager needs to take a blame for the actual units, because that is what he actually went and bought. So that is the impact of his decision is on the amount of kgs that were bought and not the amount of kgs that were budgeted for. I hope that is clear and that answers your question. Now, just for completion purposes, if I say my variance is, like I did here, 448,500, like this, it is incorrect because I haven't said whether my variance is favorable or it is unfavorable. So we spent 82 rand. We were only supposed to spend 80 rand. We were over with 2 rands. Therefore, that is an unfavorable variance. Okay? And if you look on the other side, we used material, for material A, 1.95 kgs per unit instead of 2 kgs per unit. We therefore had a saving, and that makes this variance a favorable variance. Now, I have a standard price variance of 448,500 and I have a volume variance of 460. Right? So now, if I add these together, I get 11,500. And this is your total variance, as we had already discussed in class. Right? Now, if I ask you to calculate variances and you give me the total variance, meaning you just take the standard in total, subtract from that the actual for your material, and you give me 11,500. This is not telling me anything. It is just telling me that, okay, we spent 11,500 less than what we were supposed to. However, for me to be able to make decisions, because remember, we said the reason we're doing standard costing is so that the management accountant can track and control internal costs for what? For decision-making purposes. If I have this total variance, my decisions will not be as accurate as when I have a split to say this is the price and this is the volume variance. So we can say, well, our problem came in at the price variance because that was the unfavorable variance. And then we look at the volume variance and we say, okay, we made a bit of a saving. Then we can say maybe because we use less material but we spent more, it was because we bought high quality material, which would cost more. But it means because you've got high quality material, you actually use less of the material. That's how you can use it as the finance director, for example, to make your decisions. So if you give me this, the total variance, I cannot use it for making decisions. But if you split it for me and you show me what is the price variance and what is the volume variance, I can make my decisions. That was just that in terms of the supporter baby working example that we did in class. And I just wanted to make it clear to you. So what I'm going to do next, I'm just going to give you a summary of what we just did in one page. Okay. Okay. Now, what we just did, we said we have a price variance. Now, to do a price variance, we said we need to know what was the standard price, and what the actual price was. We needed to know the difference between these two because that's where our variance arises. However, this variance is meaningless without multiplying by the quantity. So we said we will then multiply by actual quantity. Right? We multiply by actual quantity to show the impact of the decision here. So the decision to buy at price X versus price Y, the impact is shown by multiplying all this with the actual quantity, because I will get a very small variance, a meaningless variance, if I just say my variance is the standard price less the actual price. It doesn't show the impact of the decision. Just to summarize, like I said, the price variance is your standard price subtract from that your actual price multiply by actual quantity to show the impact of my decision. With that, I get a variance that can actually be used, but I need to specify if my variance is favorable or unfavorable. Remember, it's not a variance if it's not favorable or unfavorable. You've just given me a number. You haven't given me a number that I can use to make decisions. Great. Now we'll look at the volume. For the volume variance, we said, what did you use versus what you were supposed to use? So, standard quantity versus your actual this right here gives me a variance. However, that is not meaningful. That is not what we can use. It's just a difference, actually. It's just, you've just given me a difference between the standard quantity, which in our example was 2 kgs per unit, and the actual quantity. Then you need to say, okay, these quantities, I'm going to make them into units, therefore I will multiply by the units sold or produced. Right? And then I will then multiply by the standard price. This is where the problem is. You have to use the standard price, because if you use the actual price, you will be having two variances in one calculation. You are actually saying that the production manager is responsible for the usage, so the standard quantity used and the actual quantity used, but he's also responsible for the price, because if you use actual price, you're skewing the variance. Now, just to summarize, we said it's standard quantity minus actual quantity Okay. I would have to multiply by units sold. In our example, this would have been the 115,000 units, because here I'm just getting the quantity in kgs, and then I'm saying these are the units that we actually sold or produced. In our example, it was the same. Sold and produced was the same. So we just said that and the units that were produced. And I still need to multiply by the standard price. Standard price gives me the impact of my decision, but it doesn't skew the variance because I'm not using actual price, meaning I'm not having more than one variance calculation in one. I hope this helps. I'll just put these two slides, the last part, so that you can see. It is basically, for price, it is basically the standard price less the actual price multiplied by the actual quantity, which gives you a variance that can either be favorable or unfavorable. For volume, we've got the standard quantity less the actual quantity multiplied by the units. This you can also actually do in one paragraph, but I expanded it here to make it easy for you, because you can actually say standard quantity in kilograms multiplied by the units, and then multiply by the actual quantity in kilograms, multiply that by the units as well, and then you can multiply the final answer by standard price, and then you can have a variance that is either favorable or unfavorable. That is what I would like you to grasp for now. The difference between a price and a volume variance. And remember what I said in class. For standard costing, the variances are actually the same. They repeat themselves. So if you get the principle with the material variance, you can apply that principle with the labor variance. You can apply the same principle with the variable overhead variance. With that said, thank you. I hope this helps a little. See you in class on Thursday.